Greetings and welcome. We'd like to thank the Arizona Zoom group for hosting us. I'm Nell Arnaud and joined by David Hurlbert and Ken Crawford, and we are part of the Health Resource. Today we'll be doing a presentation on Alzheimer's disease. In order to better understand this condition, it's important to learn some basic brain anatomy. The brain is the source of all the qualities that define our humanity. It is the most complex part of ourselves as the seat of intelligence. It interprets the senses and controls all body movements and behavior. The cerebral cortex is the outer surface of the brain, which is a type of coating and a vital layer of tissue as thick as a stack of 2 or 3 dimes. Most of the actual information processing in the brain takes place here. The cerebral cortex is mostly the gray matter in the brain, and the many folds in the brain add to its surface area and increases the quantity of information that can be processed. The brain is composed of many different types of cells, but the primary functional unit is called the neuron. All sensations, movements, thoughts, memories, and feelings are the result of signals that pass through billions of neurons, which connect to one another, creating an extensive network. The main cell body contains the nucleus. Dendrites extend out from the cell body like the branches of a tree and connect to the other neurons to receive messages from other nerve cells. Signals then pass from the dendrites through the cell body and may travel away from the cell body, making connections to other neurons. There's a tremendous amount of electrical firing that occurs from neuron to neuron, as in a type of fiber optics high-speed wiring that allows this firing to be regulated by various neurochemical changes. This process requires an immense amount of ATP. The brain makes up about 2% of your body's weight and uses 20% of the body's total energy to function. The brain is a very energy-demanding part of the body. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that brain cells use to talk to each other. Acetylcholine generally makes the cells more excitable. Alzheimer's disease, which initially affects memory formation, is associated with a shortage of acetylcholine. Quetzal says, Alzheimer's disease is a degenerative disease of the cerebral cortex with characteristic neuropathological and neurochemical changes and inexorably progressive dementia. First signs are a high degree of forgetfulness and aphasia. The cause is metabolic disorders and, above all, genetic factors, as well as a conscious inertia and a deficiency of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Overall, a loss of brain cells in the forebrain occurs. The hippocampus is a major component of the brain, and there's one hippocampus in each side of the temporal lobes of the brain. In Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, the hippocampus is one of the first regions of the brain to suffer damage. Short-term memory loss and disorientation are included among the early symptoms. The largest job of the hippocampus is to hold short-term memories and to transfer them to long-term storage in our brain. So what causes all this memory loss? Patah describes this. The concentration of important neuronal messenger substances such as acetylcholine in particular is reduced, which leads to disturbances in information processing that cause severe learning problems and also impair memory. On the one hand, the destroyed nerve cells form fragments or not completely broken down, and on the other hand, together with the other proteins, form the Alzheimer's fibrils and Alzheimer's plaques in the brain, which are characteristic of the disease and correspond to deposits. Genetic factors may also play a causative role in the development of Alzheimer's disease. And Florina educates us about the amyloidosis skin spots. These are called age spots, commonly known as, and we see them on the back of the hands of people, also on the face, on the neck, on the forehead, on various parts of the body. So Florina tells us that with very close professional observation, the first indications of changes in the direction of Alzheimer's can be detected as early as puberty. This is also the case when amyloidosis skin spots appear and become visible. These are abnormally folded proteins that cluster together and are deposited in the tissue as amyloids, a so-called protein polysaccharide complex. The asymptomatic phase can last for many years, but during this time, characteristic biological features and changes in the brain are already recognizable and can be detected. Over many years and decades, Alzheimer's dementia creeps into the human beings because the disease does not come quickly, but very slowly and only imperceptibly. For years and even decades, the human beings themselves do not notice when they are affected. Then little by little, the first signs appear in the form of memory lapses, which are usually judged to be harmless, but which increase in number and gradually make the human beings unsteady and somehow erratic. They become more and more forgetful and can no longer find their daily utensils. We can equate this with, let's imagine some unseen, unknown phenomena slowly and imperceptibly erase the entire hard drive of all your devices, as well as all your personal information on the cloud. Perhaps you didn't notice the missing files until you need to retrieve them and realize there's increasingly missing information. Slowly and imperceptibly, until most of it, if not everything you've ever studied, languages learned, degrees you've worked for, expertise carefully crafted, all the people and interest you cared about, old friends, family members, all of it begins to slowly disappear, and you retain no references for the majority of the life you've created for yourself. Alzheimer's dementia is protracted and drags on for many years until it really appears openly. So it can take 80 years or more until it becomes acute. Then, however, forgetfulness comes quickly, occurring in 3 phases: mild, moderate, and severe. Since Alzheimer's affects people in different ways, each person may experience dementia symptoms or progress through the stages differently. The first mild stage is your basic forgetfulness, forgetting names, forgetting your keys, but are still able to drive and work and be social. The moderate phase of Alzheimer's, there are noticeable memory difficulties, strange behavior, disrupted daily routine. Retention is difficult, meaning your ability to read something and remember what you just read is difficult. The severe phase of Alzheimer's, there is tremendous confusion, getting lost to the degree where you're getting lost inside your own home, difficulty choosing appropriate clothing, hallucinations, paranoia, delusions. Over time, the patients with Alzheimer's get tangled up in the middle of speech and can no longer finish what they have started to say. In this way, the human beings become unable to read anything completely or to concentrate on anything. As the Alzheimer's disease progresses, the abilities relevant to everyday life are lost more and more, with the focus on personal hygiene and food intake. Over time, the human beings become dependent on the help of other human beings to get around and to do everything else. Alzheimer's dementia has a very long asymptomatic phase, which begins as a small child and thus long before adulthood, before the first symptoms even appear. Alzheimer's dementia is one of the most expensive medical conditions. It is difficult to carry on your daily activities, and in the severe stages of Alzheimer's, you need medical care or some kind of care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it becomes very expensive. I know I've thrown a lot of information at you now that looks rather dismal, and this is a very serious, rather awful condition. But there are good news. We do have good news for you today. And the recent research that is proving to have impressive success rates with Alzheimer's is something that Ken will be sharing with you in a few moments. Dave would like to further elucidate the many contributing factors of Alzheimer's so that we can learn what they are and to avoid them. For now, let's watch a 3-minute video called Alzheimer's in 3 minutes.
What is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a slow, fatal disease of the brain affecting 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. No one is immune. The disease comes on gradually as 2 abnormal protein fragments called plaques and tangles accumulate in the brain and kill brain cells. They start here in the hippocampus, the part of the brain where memories are first formed. Over many years' time, the plaques and tangles slowly destroy the hippocampus, and it becomes harder and harder to form new memories. Simple recollections from a few hours or days ago that the rest of us might take for granted are just not there. After that, more plaques and tangles spread into different regions of the brain, killing cells and compromising function wherever they go. This spreading around is what causes the different stages of Alzheimer's. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads here to the region of the brain where language is processed. When that happens, it gets tougher and tougher to find the right word. Next, the disease creeps toward the front of the brain, where logical thought takes place. Very gradually, a person begins to lose the ability to solve problems, grasp concepts, and make plans. Next, the plaques and tangles invade the part of the brain where emotions are regulated. When this happens, the patient gradually loses control over moods and feelings. After that, the disease moves to where the brain makes sense of things it sees, hears, and smells. In this stage, Alzheimer's wreaks havoc on a person's senses and can spark hallucinations. Eventually, the plaques and tangles erase a person's oldest and most precious memories, which are stored here in the back of the brain. Near the end, the disease compromises a person's balance and coordination. And in the very last stage, it destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing and the heart. The progression from mild forgetting to death is slow and steady, and takes place over an average of 8 to 10 years. It is relentless and, for now, incurable. Helping your family, friends, and neighbors to better understand Alzheimer's will reduce stigma, improve care, and even help the fight for a cure. Thanks for helping to do your part. Learn more at www.aboutalz.org.
This is Dave Hurlbert, FIGU passive member, working with Nell Arnaud and Ken Crawford on the causes of Alzheimer's dementia. From Bataan, CR Report 252, a whole number of serious and most serious diseases that appear in humanity on Earth have been programmed in a genetically manipulated form. The genetic manipulation that Earth scientists and physicians have identified is called the Alzheimer's gene. It's called ApoE-4 or ApoE-E-4. We know that people who have the ApoE-4 gene has a 2-fold increase risk of Alzheimer's disease. If you have 2 copies, one from your mom and one from your dad, the risk could be up to 12-fold. The primary cause of Alzheimer's on the next slide is the genetic manipulation. Tal states quite amazingly that it's gene-controlled disease, and in this form, in certain cases, too much aluminum is transported to the brain as a result. But Billy brings up the point that it occurred to him the idea that this could have been a genetic manipulation that the powers in Sirius regions had already carried out in ancient times in order to prepare the fighting machines in such a wise that sooner or later they die of it. The other diseases such as cancer, etc., could be equally genetically programmed. Yes, says Pata, this is indeed the case because a whole number of serious and most serious diseases that appear in humanity on Earth have been programmed in a genetically manipulated form. In order to free oneself from this, however, humanity of Earth or its scientists must learn how to deal with genetic manipulation, for which we release impulses in a responsible manner. Other causes of Alzheimer's dementia are quite extensive: inflammation, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, microwaves, glutamate, PCB in the soil, glyphosate, drugs, a general indifference to health, aspartame for unregulated auto-produced food or manufactured food, mobile phones, digital media, toxic substances by smoking, underlying diseases, food additives, metabolic disorders, thyroid disorders, really bad music, idleness, trans fat, chemicals of all sorts, spoiled food, hygiene products and chemicals, complaining, vitamin deficiencies, congenital factors, and long-term weightlessness in space. Air pollution is a big concern here. When we presented the plastics and the toxicity in the air, we provided you with a list of supplements you should take to detox on a daily basis. Toxic air, water, and food is causing dementia and all forms of cancer. If you need a copy of the supplement on how to detox, we'll provide that in the chat in a presentation handout. From 680 from Pata, very important. All aquatic and terrestrial organisms that serve as food for the human beings are also contaminated by these tiny and minute plastic particles impregnated with various toxins, according to which when the human being eats meat as well as fish or any other aquatic organisms, it automatically absorbs the food contaminated with toxins and plastic nanoparticles. And the whole thing then contaminates the entire organism. And then the whole thing is also very bad and dangerous to health because such poison-pregnant plastic nanoparticles, some of which are already smaller than a nanosize, respectively a billionth, and which have been reamed up to the atto size, respectively a trillionth, are spread in the atmosphere and thus in the air we breathe and are inhaled by all breathable creatures, only to settle in the organism in a way that causes suffering and disease. Inflammation leads to numerous diseases, Pata says, such as cancer and Alzheimer's, and this also explains the health-promoting effects of meditation. However, the inflammations we are suffering from are meningitis, which is of the brain, myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, infectious diseases, chronic poisoning, dental and gum infections, health-damaging problems, metabolic disorders, various nervous diseases, leaky gut syndrome, herpes simplex. Inflammation of any kind in the body leads to cognitive decline. This includes arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, heart disease, leaky gut, heartburn, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, high blood sugar, Lyme disease, gum disease, gingivitis, periodontitis, and herpes. Silent killer of type 2 diabetes. We also know that 50 to 80% of people with Alzheimer's disease have type 2 diabetes. No other condition brings on aging faster than type 2 diabetes. One of the main causes of Alzheimer's disease is insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, with high blood sugar being one of the main causes of blood-brain barrier permeability. Due to high levels of blood sugar, the brain-blood barrier permeability limits the amount of glucose transporters on its surface, and the brain begins to starve in terms of energy, since the sugars can't get in as easily. It is as if the brain is trying to protect itself from sugar overload. So as the transporters decrease in number, the energy supply goes down, and hence cellular respiration, energy production, and brain activity all decrease. From FIGU Advisory 3, what similarities might there be, for example, between a cut, a heart attack, gingivitis, stroke, diabetes, stomach ulcers, a sports injury, Alzheimer's disease, or cancer? All of these complaints are based on the inflammatory reaction. From Pata, high blood pressure is treated by terrestrial medicine with anti-hypertensive drugs, but there is no cure, which is otherwise possible with the natural remedies, as I called out on the 4th of January. It is also a fact that the body of the human being with hypertension resists the lowering of blood pressure imposed by the medication of modern chemical medicine, often by raising the blood pressure again, or even more so, which then erroneously simply increases the dose, causing serious damage to health. The stats on hypertension are as alarming as 50% of the adults in the U.S. have hypertension. About 20% of young adults aged 18 to 39 have hypertension. High blood pressure is associated with dementia risk, particularly when you get it before the 50s or in midlife. High blood pressure is a lifestyle factor that's easily modifiable. The lifestyle interventions to improve blood pressure are exercise and sauna. Glutamate. Billy says to Patah, tell me, dear friend, do you, Puljaran, use glutamate as a flavor enhancer in your dishes? We often hear people talking about how good or harmful this substance actually is, but we don't know anything for sure. It'd be good if you could explain something about it. And if you could only give me a remedy that at least counteracts forgetfulness, even in Alzheimer's. And for Patah says in Contact Report 527, first of all, it's important to say that we, Puljaran, do not use glutamate or other flavor enhancers in our food. Glutamate is a brain's own messenger substance that can be very dangerous for human nerve cells because they die if they're giving too much of it. As a matter of principle, it should not be added to any food and should also not be consumed by the human beings in any other way. However, since human beings disregard this and glutamate is repeatedly added to foods, the factor of weight gain arises on the one hand because the feeling of satiety is cheated and much more is eaten than hunger demands. And on the other hand, as already mentioned, glutamate kills the nerve cells and thus creates small cavities in the brain, with neurodegenerative damage also appearing. For example, with regard to diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and various forms of cancer and multiple sclerosis, etc. So it is unfortunately to be said that in many Earth humans, the aforementioned flavor enhancer is often to blame for the above-mentioned diseases, even as this is not recognized by the medical profession and is denied by glutamate manufacturers. Food poisoning is also caused by glutamate when bacteria bound to it pass through the stomach acid unhindered and causes inflammation and poisoning in the intestines.
So thanks, Dave, for that intro on all the causes. My name's Ken. I'm from North Carolina, and I'm doing the solutions for Alzheimer's dementia part of this presentation. So one of the major things to understand about Alzheimer's dementia is that it deals with the breakdown or permeability of the blood-brain barrier. There will be a link to a video and handout at the end of the presentation that explains the connection of the blood-brain barrier breakdown of Alzheimer's dementia. The following information are mostly centered around the idea of preventing the blood-brain barrier breakdown and the healing of the blood-brain barrier. First, we must avoid the exposure to causes, or at least mitigate them when possible. The main driver of blood-brain barrier permeability or breakdown is high blood sugar levels, followed by other things that cause breakdown, such as high blood pressure or hypertension, high cholesterol or hyperlipidemia, smoking, mold such as mycotoxins or trichothecene, chemicals such as benzene or toluene, as well as those chemicals from food, makeup, air fresheners, perfume, cleaning products, etc. And then there's also the Wi-Fi and electronic radiation, as well as vaccines. There is a correlation between all those stroke and myocarditis victims or other people who got cardiovascular conditions induced by vaccines. Next, we need to eliminate exposure to causes instead of just avoidance or mitigation. These are things we can more easily eliminate our exposure to, such as drinking alcohol, eating excessive amounts of sugar, and watch out for all that added sugar everywhere, you know. Stop smoking if you're currently a smoker, and stop complaining and stop doing drugs, which can include illegal or prescription drugs. If you are on prescription drugs for any of the conditions on the previous slide, consider improving your health so that you can get off of those drugs. The main culprit here is the blood sugar levels, as the picture here emphasizes. From rat fever 3, there was a study from Stanford that showed brain shrinkage, just like that from Alzheimer's disease seen earlier. The hippocampus is responsible for memory formation, and that area is implicated as one of the first regions to be damaged in Alzheimer's disease. So next, we need to focus on obtaining optimal health. Things that can be implemented quickly and help are air purifiers. There will be another link to a video in the handout at the end of the presentation that shows the connections between air pollution and Alzheimer's dementia. Even individuals in their late teens in very polluted cities can succumb to Alzheimer's dementia. Next, you can optimize your nutrition and make sure you're getting the right amount of nutrition. Other good things to do are having a neutral, positive thinking, meditating often, getting enough sleep, learning a new language. Exercise and fasting are a great help with the blood-brain barrier healing. Also helpful are a healthy psyche, harmonious music and singing, dancing, and psychomotor therapy, and the training of the coordination and perception and balance. Another possible way to help is if science comes so far that we can actually reverse the genetic manipulation that may sit at the root cause of some of the reasons people succumb to Alzheimer's dementia. Lastly, we need to detox from metals and plastics in the environment. You can also go back to the metals and plastics presentation done a few months ago towards the beginning of 2023 for reference on how to detoxify. Okay, now we can focus more on the optimization of nutrition. One of the most helpful ways to heal our blood-brain barrier is omega-3s. One can convert ALA, also known as alpha-linolenic acid, into DHA. ALA can also be found in many plant foods like Brussels sprouts and walnuts, seaweeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, and even perilla oil, one of my favorites. But better than ALA is EPA, or isosapentonic acid. I don't know if I said that right. And DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, which one can obtain from fish. However, with toxic levels in fish, one may choose to supplement. Also, choline is a component of membrane lipids, such as phosphatidylcholine. And phosphatidylcholine is a precursor to the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Choline is also important for the production of neural synapses, and it's found mostly in animal products. And then we can move to the vitamin Bs. Vitamin B1, or thiamine, is critical for learning and memory formation, and it also helps to lower blood sugar. Vitamins B6, B9, and B12 all improve methylation and help to reduce homocysteine, which is responsible for the inflammation, so that will help lower the inflammation. Elevated homocysteine levels are associated with brain atrophy and cognitive impairment. Low levels of vitamin A, specifically retinol, are associated with increased risk of Alzheimer's dementia, especially those for whom carry ApoE4 as well as ApoE2. Vitamin D, once in the cell's nucleus, can turn on hundreds of genes, and it also plays a role in the creation and maintenance of brain synapses. Vitamin D should always be paired with vitamin K2. You can also go back to a previous presentation on that. K2 acts as a brain antioxidant as well as removing calcification of arteries and blood vessels, including at the blood-brain barrier. Vitamin E also acts as an antioxidant for the brain. It prevents monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids, which include all the types of omega-3s like ALA, EPA, and DHA, from breaking down, so it preserves them so they last longer. Vitamin C also helps out with antioxidation and helps with the immune system. And then the zinc and copper, you want to make sure that they're in balance, because an imbalance can cause problems since they compete for absorption. And zinc is vital to the brain and helps reduce inflammation and also boost the immune system function. Magnesium can help with the production of serotonin for the brain. And transdermal magnesium is also a good choice for those low in magnesium, especially if suffering from Lyme disease. Lastly, fermented foods help with gut health, and specifically lactofermentation can help heal many of the organs, including the blood-brain barrier. Also worth noting is that nutrition is very individualized, especially in regard to each person's genetic susceptibilities to genes that influence Alzheimer's dementia progression, as well as other genes that lower absorption of certain vitamins, with omega-3s and carotenoid conversion, as well as vitamin B9, B12, and vitamin D absorption being the most problematic for some individuals with certain genetic traits. Could some of this be related to the genetic manipulation? You be the judge. Next, we have the remedies we're drifting into. The next few slides deal with specific items mentioned in the contact reports. First is galantamine, derived from the plant Galanthus nivalis. Quetzal speaks of this remedy stimulating brain activity and suitable for the treatment of Alzheimer's dementia. While it won't cure Alzheimer's dementia, it can slow the decline. So Billy says here, and if you only give me a remedy that at least counteracts forgetfulness, even in Alzheimer's. Quetzal says, especially in the elderly people, the remedy was used to stimulate brain activity. The active substance, galantamine, was rediscovered on the earth at the end of the 50s when it was extracted from tubers or bulbs of the Caucasian Galanthus nivalis plant by a very complex purification process. However, the substance will only be synthetically produced in the next decade, as a review of the future has shown, and it will then also be discovered that the active substance, galantamine, is also suitable for the treatment of Alzheimer's dementia, but will not be approved for treatment until after the turn of the millennia. Technically speaking, it will be an anti-dementia drug, i.e. a drug against brain weakness. However, it is not an actual remedy, but only an active substance that will have a slowing effect on the course of the disease, and that only in the case of moderate and mild symptoms. The next remedies focus on helping to alleviate stresses on the brain as well as the blood-brain barrier. If one takes control of their blood sugar levels and gets them stabilized to the appropriate range, then the brain will have plenty of energy. One can limit sugar intake, and in particular fructose, as well as maintaining a healthy weight, or weight loss if one is overweight will help to maintain stable blood sugar levels. Exercise is one of the best ways to boost the metabolism and start burning excess sugar in the body. And as a bonus, the lactic acid that is produced by the cells when the mitochondria run out of oxygen and goes anaerobic is the production of more lactic acid or lactate than usual, which in turn can be absorbed by the organs, including the brain and the blood-brain barrier, to help heal the blood-brain barrier. Lactate is involved in the processes of memory formation and neuroprotection. The astrocytes mentioned at the beginning of the presentation in the brain also transfer glucose and lactate to sustain energy requirements in the brain, and therefore the brain can use the lactate from the exercise as a type of energy source. Lactate in the bloodstream during exercise can also flow to the liver, and the liver can synthesize glucose in order to maintain energy levels once the blood sugar levels drop. Adipocytes, or fat cells, can also produce lactate under anaerobic conditions, or in other words, when you run out of breath during exercise, hence the burning of fat. Lactate produced by muscles during exercise are also taken up by the heart, brain, and made into more glucose in the liver. Another energy source for the brain is ketones. One can induce ketosis during fasting or by having no carbs and certain fats. Being in a ketosis state upregulates autophagy, which can help eliminate those dysfunctional cells in the brain that were mentioned earlier. In the introduction to the meditation, Billy also mentions that meditation can maintain the form barkite of the brain, also known as plasticity in English, suggesting that meditation may also play a role or help with autophagy in the brain. Being in a state of ketosis can also reduce food cravings and help with satiety. And so the next one we got here is extra virgin olive oil. It was mentioned in rat ghee before, and it shows how it can reduce amyloid beta peptides and decrease tau tangles and activate autophagy. It is a free radical scavenger, and it improves memory and synaptic integrity. Scientists think that the compound oleochantol is responsible for these actions. Next, we need to remove the causes of inflammation. So first, we need to detoxify the things that are giving us the inflammation, like all these things listed below and also mentioned previously. So make sure you brush your teeth often and floss, because we don't need any of these inflammatory conditions in the mouth. We are also all very individual, and we have individual problems. So each individual must be observant and figure out things that are problematic for them personally, whether it's food allergies or particular foods causing inflammation. We can also remove stress, i.e. the cortisol levels, which cause inflammation, and we can practice meditation and get sufficient sleep to help lower the stress. Okay, so the next part is about treating chronic pathogens, which is very vital. We need to treat outbreaks as soon as possible, because the longer your body is under attack, the more amyloid beta becomes produced. Things like yeast, molds, spirochetes, and parasites, fungi are included, and one should take preventive measures against these as soon as possible. Examples are syphilis and Lyme disease, herpes, malaria, babesia from tick bites, gingivitis, bacteria, cold sores, fungal infections, etc. Good bacteria such as lactobacillus and bifidobacteria are involved in the production of the neurotransmitter GABA from glutamate, which helps the brain to function. So the next remedy here is the MCT oil, also known as medium-chain triglycerides oil. It helps with several of the things previously mentioned. It helps produce ketones in the body without being in a fasted state, and also helps to lower cholesterol levels. It stimulates metabolism and promotes absorption of calcium and magnesium, according to PATA and Contact Report 619. It can help with satiety, being in the ketosis state. One of the main ingredients in it is lauric acid, which, according to PATA and Contact 552, is very effective against bacteria, yeast, fungi, and viruses by dissolving envelope membranes. He says it works against herpes, measles, and other viral infections. I was recently reading an article where you could take a small cap of MCT oil and swish it around in your mouth for about 10 minutes each day for a couple of weeks to reduce gingivitis and periodontitis and other bacteria in the mouth and gums. So next, we need to avoid and remove toxins. Pollution has been found to be correlated to higher risks of Alzheimer's dementia, and amyloid is the immune system's response that is binding to the toxic invaders and then depositing in the brain or the skin as amyloid beta, and air purifiers can help reduce this. Remove oneself from environments that are moldy as soon as possible, but the immune system will respond in the same way, and it will be constant if you live in such an environment. Avoid toxins in products, for example, candles with paraffin. When they burn, they release benzene and toluene. Make sure to air out the house or open windows after the use of incense is another thing we can do. Also, avoid metals, carcinogens, and chemicals in food. For example, fish might be high in omega-3s, but you could also be getting a high dose of mercury at the same time. We also need to avoid pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, etc., as well as if you do have dental amalgams, it would be good to have them removed because they would be a constant toxin. So next we have self-duty, and we have things that we need to do for ourselves as a duty and for self-care, which includes taking care of our body, our psyche, and our consciousness. For the body, we need to take care of our nutrition, teeth, our clothing, and appearance, as well as avoiding drugs, alcohol, keeping our immune system healthy, as well as keeping physically fit. For the psyche, we should practice good manners, have a positive outlook, have decency and modesty, as well as making sure we can calm and balance our psyche with meditation, singing, harmonic music, dancing, poetry or literature, having a fulfilled social life, plenty of time spent in nature, as well as having a healthy self-esteem and staying psychically fit. Lastly, consciousness, which is the most important since our thinking will affect our body and our psyche. We need neutral positive thinking and also continual learning, and to use our faculties with rational, logical, and sensible thoughts. Meditation can also help keep our consciousness sharp and to keep our brain plastic, which also helps us stay consciously fit. All in all, we should not neglect ourselves over others, as the self is most important. One cannot help others if they can't help themselves. If body, psyche, and consciousness become rusty, it leads to dementia. And inspired from Contact Report 850, which came out recently, we have wrong or bad thoughts or wrong or bad feelings result in a psychological state which increases the risk of dementia. Every earthling should be aware of the fact that the characteristics of the human being's character play just as an important role as his or her activities, because this is very important in order to be fit not only from head to toe, but also in terms of consciousness and the function of the brain. So overall, everything in this regard is important to prevent dementia. Thank you, everyone.